Oh, cool. It was just this exploration place.
You ready and back? Very good. Well, welcome everyone to the staff meeting. I'll turn it over to our manager. We have 2 items to discuss today.
Right, thank you, Chairman. The second item we'll discuss today, Lindsay will get up and talk about her cost of government analysis and give the commission an update on that. But first, we have a couple of guests in. Brad Rooks from KU Endowment and Dr. Cassie Carlson are here. And Tim Kaufman and I were able to talk to Brad and Jill Docking in the middle of last week just about what is happening in the world of child psychiatry and services here in Sedgwick County. As you can remember, the commission voted a few years ago to help fund KVC Hospital up on 21st Street, gave a donation to help ramp that up. And since that time, that service, of course, is well used. But as you well know, there's staffing shortages stem to stern in the system, and at the very top with child psychiatrists and physicians who serve kids, there is a shortage. So I think Brad wants to start us off this morning and talk about a potential solution or a partial solution to that matter, and I'll let him introduce Dr. Carlson when it's her turn. So Brad, if you want to take the podium over there, sir.
Good morning and welcome. We appreciate you coming today. I have had an opportunity to hear some of this briefing in the past when the Fort Wichita briefing was held over at Exploration Place. So I appreciate you coming to let all the commissioners hear. And welcome.
Thank you for having us today, and start out with a bang here on my first meeting. My apologies for creating technical difficulties. I appreciate you allowing time for KU Endowment. I'm here to assist the school in raising funds for our campus and some of the great works we do, and I think it's always best to hear straight from the experts than perhaps the fundraiser. And so I wanted to include Dr. Cassie Carlson in the conversation. And Dr. Carlson is a child psychiatrist who recently came back to Kansas, and I'll let her tell a little bit of her history, but she is a great shining example of us being able to bring a child psychiatrist to this community who has hopes, aspirations to build a child psychiatry fellowship that will provide the resources I think we need for the children and adolescents, not only in Sedgwick County, but also in western and rural Kansas as well. And so I wanted to bring her up to the podium and talk a little bit just about the critical issues we are running into with children's and adolescent mental health, and also a little bit about our fellowship, how we think we can address those issues directly at the school. So.
Very good. Dr. Carlson, thank you. I know that we've met. We talked about this a little bit, so thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So, well, good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me this morning. As Brad said, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I came to KU about 6 months ago. And one of the reasons that really influenced my decision to take the position was the emphasis and priority that I saw the organization putting on child mental health and improving access to care. And even though, and I know many of you have heard and read that, we're in a national mental health crisis, I will say that there, real solutions like creating training programs to increase the number of child and adolescent psychiatrists, that's not happening everywhere. And that's something to be really proud of. And like I said, really influenced my decision to come. So, it's really an honor to come and be able to talk to you about mental health, but also a real privilege to come and talk to you about, mental health as a fellow Kansan. So as he mentioned, I grew up in Kansas. I grew up on a 6th-generation farm in Harper County and went to Kansas State University. And I've been on faculty at Indiana University for the last 8 years. And my role there, I specialize in seeing kids and adults with neurodevelopmental disorders like autism, things like that. But my other large role there was I was the program director for the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Fellowship, and also the Triple Board program, which is training physicians to be psychiatrists, child psychiatrists, and pediatricians. And so Indiana has a lot of similarities to Kansas in terms of a few urban areas and a lot of rural areas. And so I've had a lot of experience training physicians to treat children in large rural states that are very underserved. So exciting for me to come back and do that in Kansas. And when I talked at Exploration Place, I talked a little bit about my history and kind of what it means to me to be back in Kansas and raise my girls here. And I was raised by a family of generations of farmers and teachers. And, they always talked about leaving things better than you found them. And I think also taking a real responsibility that for some of the success for the next generation. And I think this is really an opportunity for us when we look at where we're at now. And to me, some of the most striking kind of, eye-opening things of where are we at now. Kansas is fortunate they do that Kansas Communities That Care survey for all middle school and high school students in the state of Kansas. And what we found, they just released their 2022 data. And what we found is that almost 40% of middle school and high school students endorsed feeling symptoms of depression in the last 12 months, significant enough to impair their functioning either at home or at school. Almost a third reported that they had had some suicidal thoughts. Again, this is middle and high school students, some suicidal thoughts in the past 12 months. And 12% reported that they had tried to take their own life at some point in their life. 12%. I mean, just think about how many kids are in a class, right, or things like that. It's a large percentage, and that takes it takes a lot to really reach these kids, not only because obviously it's identifying and diagnosing, but it's also access to care. If they do try to seek help, do they have to wait 6 months or a year to see somebody? Can they get in? And it's certainly a real issue. Part of that reason is that based on need, Kansas is estimated to need about 400 child psychiatrists to really meet our needs. We have about 60. The majority of them are all located in the northeast corner of the state. There are 12 child psychiatrists for the rest of the state. One thing I like to tell people is that when I moved to Wichita, I increased the number of child psychiatrists by 20%. That's not a really great statistic. And so one of our goals really is how do we change that? How do we meet that need? And one of those is creating more child psychiatrists. I mean, I love rural Kansas. It's where I'm from, but it can sometimes be a hard place to recruit to. And one of the things that we know, and this is national in all physician specialties, is that people tend to work where they trained. And I think it's, that they know the system, they've developed community, they've maybe bought a house, they have kids. And so a lot of people stay. And the Department of Psychiatry here at KU, which has been a department for 50 years, have a really great track record of keeping psychiatrists in the community. And I think the quote that my chair quotes, the number, and Brad can help me, but I think 80% of the psychiatrists in the area, so not just Wichita, but kind of the surrounding area, trained at KU Wichita. So that really tells you, I think, the impact that the Department of Psychiatry is able to have here. And the nice thing about child fellows is that they're physicians, right? So their training program is a little different. They're not just sitting in a classroom learning the basics, right? They're already physicians. Much of their training is actually in real time, taking care of patients, seeing children and families, and we're proposing to have a training program where we would have 2 fellows per year. And it's a 2-year program, so a total of 4 fellows at a time. And a fellow can probably see about 500 kids over the course of a year when you think about inpatient, outpatient, emergency room visits, things like that, and certainly have a lot of impact as well in the community. We already have programs at KU Wichita called Kansas Kids Map. I don't know if any of you have heard that, but it's a program where pediatricians or nurse practitioners, family medicine physicians can call and have a consultation with a child psychiatrist. And so when they don't have access, they can still reach that expertise. And that's also, I think, a big thing is that we're not only wanting to train child psychiatrists who are experts in mental health, but also child psychiatrists who are really experts in serving, a large population through other ways, through communicating with other physicians and things like that to really meet a larger area. I know that one of KU Wichita's missions is really not only to serve the Wichita area, but really takes on the responsibility of serving most of Kansas and rural Kansas. And I think that's something that we really take to heart and is important too when we're thinking about designing and building our fellowship. So I'm certainly happy I know Brad is here as well to present some things, or we're happy to answer some questions, but I thought I would at least start with that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carlson. And again, I appreciate the presentation that everyone made at Exploration Place, not just you, but there's some exciting things happening at the medical training facility that we have right here in Wichita. Mm-hmm. And this new fellowship is a great opportunity that I would like Sedgwick County to be part of. So I'll turn it over and see if any commissioners have questions. But Brad, you're going to talk about what the ask is, or?
Sure. Happy to do that after any questions.
Okay, let's see if we got any questions for Dr. Carlson first of all. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just you use the word psychiatrist quite a lot. You never have said the word psychologist. I'm curious if that's an intentional differentiation.
So a psychiatrist is a medical physician. We go to medical school for 4 years, and so I trained for 4 years as to medical school, and then you go on for a fellowship in adult psychiatry, or for a residency in adult psychiatry, and then fellowship in child psychiatry. So that's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Is a psychiatrist is an MD or a DO.
I understand that.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I'm just saying that for the population that has symptoms of depression, for example, in the last 12 months, for example. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what percentage of the population that is. I don't think you gave us a percentage there, but would a psychologist be able to provide some help to someone in that situation?
So absolutely, a psychologist can help. KU Wichita does have some child psychology. They have an internship. They have an internship in neuropsychology. And I think it's just really, a lot of times in child psychiatry, we work as a team and we work very closely with psychologists. So where I trained in fellowship at the University of Colorado and where I practice at Indiana University, child psychiatrists and child psychologists are working very closely together as part of a team. So I think there's certainly a need for child psychologists as well, but there's a very critical need for child psychiatrists.
I'm just doing some math, trying to figure out what the population of children is and what percentage of them have a need for psychiatrist. And I don't know, you basically said about one psychiatrist for every 500 cases, I guess, in a year. Mm-hmm. Those are individuals?
Yeah. Well, that that's the potential opportunity that they could see in their year of training. I think just to also show that it's not, they're seeing children now when they're in training. That's part of their training. So, and once they're out of fellowship, I mean, that number is potentially larger. You know, there are many private practice psychiatrists or that work at KBC that certainly see many more children than that. But kind of when they're training, they're already seeing children, they're already making an impact and able, you know, to help treat and diagnose. It's just under supervision.
Curiously, do you have the stats? You said symptoms of depression in the last 12 months and suicidal thoughts in the last 12 months. What's the percentages of those? What percentage of the children population?
So that was
have
the
those?
middle school and high school students throughout the state of Kansas that endorsed that on the survey that Kansas does every year.
But what percentage of the population have had symptoms of depression in the last 12 months or have had, I think you said some suicidal thoughts in the last 12 months, or you said 12% attempted suicide in the last 12 months?
They said that at some point in their life.
Some point in
that
their
they
life,
had.
okay.
Yeah. So the 2019 data, I will tell you, is just as alarming. So if we're thinking like, is this just due to the pandemic? Is this just because they've been out of school and everything's been turned up down? Yes, it's gotten worse. But, you know, the 2019 data I have in front of me, so that was the last time they had done the survey as well. And sorry, I have it in front of me. The numbers are not that much better. So it was 33% versus almost 40% that had symptoms of depression in the prior 12 months. It was 18% had serious thoughts of suicide versus 32%. 9% in 2019 endorsed that they had tried to take their own lives. So I think some of what we have to think about here is that Kansas has really not kept pace with the growing demand and need for child and adolescent mental health services. And not many states have. This is not just a Kansas problem. But I think that, you know, it's something that Kansas can start working towards a solution for, because certainly I think if we wait for someone else to fix it for us, to do it for us, I'm not sure that it'll happen.
So I actually have two final questions. And the first one is very simple. You know, what states are example? What state's the best in the nation? This is our best example to follow, and how are they doing that? And secondly, how does this compare to the adult population? That's all my questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Sure, absolutely. So I don't know that there is any state that would say that they have a good handle on it. And I think when we look at which states are most underserved, most of the country is underserved, but Kansas is certainly in the bottom third or fourth in terms of our number of child psychiatrists per capita and based on needs. So I think we certainly have a ways to go to even, you know, get back up to the average. As far as adult numbers, you know, I think those are also really significant, and I apologize, I don't have the data right in front of me of what the adults, you know, estimates are right now, but one thing that we do know is that the majority of mental illness starts before the age of 24. So 75% of adult mental illness starts before the age of 24. 50% starts before the age of 18. And we know that untreated mental illness that starts in childhood changes rates of ability to go to college, to work. It has influences on drug use and incarceration. And so really this is an investment and preventative as well, thinking about how do we reduce numbers of adults with mental illness that'll need these services.
Actually, one follow-up. You're citing quite a lot of data, and I appreciate that very much. I love data. I assume you've got this in some type of report that I can get a copy of?
Yes, absolutely.
Please send that to me if you don't mind. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I don't see any other questions for you at this point. Again, I thank you very much. I thank you for the presentation that you gave to all the folks over at Exploration Place the other day. And I think we probably need to talk to Brad next a little bit,
Yeah.
and probably Lindsay. We'll have a question for you here in a little bit. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Brad, can you tell us what it's going to cost to fund this fellowship over the next 10 years?
Sure. With child psychiatry fellowships, a little bit different than how we would fund normal fellowships at the school. Normally that's a request at the very beginning you make for graduate medical education funding, and then through a partner who makes that request, be a partner hospital or institution, get the funding and get started. With Child Psychiatry Fellowship, you actually have to have the program up and running before you make that request. So there's an upfront cost to start the fellowship here. And so what we've laid out is a 10-year time frame. In the first 3 years, phase one is what we would do to get the program up and running. That effectively costs for us to get the program up and running and get the first group of fellows in and recruited and educated is roughly about $300,000 a year for 3 years, so $900,000 for phase one. What we're effectively calling phase two is at that point in time, Dr. Carlson would, and she'd be doing it from day one, would be working towards accreditation of the program. Once we can get it accredited through ACGME, then it would have ongoing funding support. We would no longer need, we would just need effectively the kickstarting funding to get it up and running. Then around year 4 or 5, they would put the request in for accreditation, hopefully know by year 5 if it was accredited or not. If worst case scenario and there's no accreditation, no additional funding, over a 10-year period, if the program is funded $380,000 a year, about $3.8 million, $380,000 a year for 10 years, we'll at least have graduated 12 fellows from the program, and we currently have 12 child psychiatrists in our community right now. And so we've set that up as our goal. Our hope and belief is that we will get that accreditation, we'll get that ongoing funding, but it's not a program that will always need to be funded by the community. But our hope is if we can get some initial support in those first 3 years to get started, then that next phase is accreditation. And then, of course, our hope is we're not done by year 10, but at least by year 10, if we've raised $3.8 million, we'll have at least been able to use the term replace or enhance the amount of child psychiatrists we have in this community. So I believe our request, and as we talked to, was funding for the initial startup, that $300,000 a year for 3 years will allow us to be able to up and get going. And Dr. Carlson didn't get to mention it, but if they knew they had the funding, they'd be able to get started now, and we could probably have the program up and running by 2024. So something that we have the resources to be able to get started and get going as long as we know that we have that support. I additionally want to share, since we had the meeting last week, we've just found out that we do have $1 million in funding from the Patterson Family Foundation out of Kansas City. So we have some initial funding. So whether or not that's the first 3 years or the next phase going to accreditation, we know that 3.8 will be what we need to get it through and have it sustained so we can go and have this be a program that lasts. So.
Okay. Well, I've got a quick question for Lindsay, and then I'll come back to you if that's
Sure.
okay. Lindsay, is this something that would qualify under ARPA if we took the first year?
As long as we have the statistics, which it sounds like we will from the reports, to show how the pandemic has exacerbated the issue, then it should be eligible. We would have to go through like an RFP process, basically, to say, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Come and give us a proposed solution, and then there would be some monitoring and everything that had to be done. But I think just having heard what I have so far, yes, it likely is eligible.
Very good. I appreciate that information. I guess that I would be interested, and I probably need to turn it over to Tim also, but I'd be interested in helping you start that first year.
Okay.
And if we can use ARPA money, but I need to find out if I've got at least 2 other commissioners that would be interested in helping with that. So I know we don't vote today, but I think if we give Tim and Lindsay the guidance that if it can meet all the requirements of ARPA, if we could move and help them with the first year. Commissioner Cruz.
So the funding that you're requesting, what kind of requirements? I mean, I know that you said folks who are trained in a certain spot generally work in the community that they're trained. Mm-hmm. But what's the guarantee that those folks will stay here and be in our community if they're trained with our citizens' tax dollars?
Sure. That's a very good question. I wish I could. Oh, Dr. Carlson, if you wanted to address that. Sure.
So unfortunately, there is no guarantee, right, that they will stay. And, right now, Kansas trains 2 or 3 child psychiatrists a year. That's all for the whole state up in Kansas City. They tend to not either leave Kansas City or don't come to the rest of Kansas, and they can leave. And I think we have to, like I said, look on data that a lot of times people do stay where they train. And I think we can put together a program that is really influential. But I think we also have to look at what is our success of getting child psychiatrists to come here without training them here. So, for example, KVC, great hospital, they don't have a child psychiatrist. They haven't been able to hire a child psychiatrist. So, even though it's a great, beautiful facility that I've toured, so it is really hard. And part of that is because, there's not enough child psychiatrists anywhere. So you've got to really think about how do we get someone to come and invest and want to stay in this community. And I think that the training program certainly increases our chances of having more child psychiatrists in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have one more question, please. I'm sorry, not for you.
Not for me. Okay.
Yeah, a question for Brad. I'm sorry, I don't want to, didn't write down your names. My apologies. So Brad, you said the Patterson family. Who else are you looking to seek funding from?
Sure. We're making connections with corporations and foundations within the community and potentially private donors. So we recently had a visit with Fidelity Bank, met with Simmons Bank. We have a support from the IMA Foundation as well. And so we are aggressively reaching out to private entities and corporations and foundations. And so it's an ongoing process. We also have a Spark request out for $3 million, but we don't know at this time necessarily where that will come in, but we're trying to do our due diligence as we reach out to a number of entities. So this is not by no means is our only stop or our first stop, but we wanted to come to you right away as we had a chance to visit about the program. And to answer, or at least my response to your question is, we don't have a lot of fellowships out of our campus, just sports medicine, so it's hard to do apples and apples to say what's our placement rate or capture rate, our fellows, but I looked at our residencies, which we have a number of those, and they've been going for a number of decades, and our psychiatry residency actually has kept a higher percentage even of any of all of our residency graduates, roughly about 30% in the last 10 years. Now that's not 50 or 75%, but our hope is if we talk to and work with our partners at KVC, Ascension via Christie, at Wesley, that there are these more substantive conversations about how do we keep these specialists in our community once they have graduated, and is this a great place for them to want to place. But we look around too in the number of family physicians and specialists that have stayed here. We have about 50% of the medical society and the physicians in town are our graduates. So we feel very, very good about our chances of keeping them, but unfortunately don't have a hard number that we can say yet. But I think if we do train them, I think we have a really good chance of keeping them.
Sure. Well, that's, I think, the goal,
Yeah,
I guess, if
sure.
we're going to fund a portion or part of this program. Thank you, Brad. I think that's all my questions for you. Lindsay, so with ARPA, we have a significant conflict of interest training the other day, right, a couple months back. So how is this not a conflict of interest of us hearing about the program before we're making a decision to fund it?
So I think in this case, we have one medical school in our community. And so the risk of competition is minimal. So I don't see a lot of risk for that. The other thing I would tell you is what's in the back of my mind is revenue replacement, which is where we take the amount of revenue that we supposedly would have received but for COVID, and we can use that for anything that would be a traditional government service. And that comes with fewer restrictions, and so that would be another way forward.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I mean, that conversation was pretty important.
It was.
So, and it was all about not hearing things like this before we make decisions. So I'm glad that we were able to clear that up in this open space. I guess the whole system, I mean, I would be supportive of this. I think it's important that, I mean, what is the quote? It's easier to love a child than heal a broken adult. That's vital, I think, to the success of our community. But the system as a whole is really terrible. And I wonder, how do we plan, and this is just another moment to reiterate the fact that we need adult intervention as well, and those school interventions speaking to each other. I mean, my child is in school, but her social worker and her therapist are not speaking to the social worker and the therapist that are going to the school. So there is a disconnect there that we need to rectify. I mean, I think having this program would absolutely benefit our community, but the system as a whole, we've got to make sure that we pay attention to and fund as well. So that's my comments, Chairman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And Brad, I don't know if we really introduced you properly, but you look at all the endowments for all of KU Medical Center here in Wichita.
Yes, I'm the development director for the Wichita campus and the Salina campus, and so I've had a chance to see what are all the financial support options within our own endowment within the community, and have also had the benefit of everyone who gives to the KU endowment across all campuses. And so we've made sure to do a very thorough vetting process of feasibility across those as well. And so as I've mentioned, we feel there's no one entity, even the city or county, that this should be the only thing that cares about our children and adolescent mental health. And so my belief is we continue to reach out, talk to a number of folks about supporting what we're trying to do.
Very good. Well, the reason I brought that up was if there's a worry, I don't know if there is or not, on whether this would continue after we kickstarted it. You have experience as a fundraiser across our community looking at these large corporations and other donors. So I don't want any worry that maybe it wouldn't go anywhere after we started.
Sure. As much as I can tell the future, I can tell you that my intent is I would have failed horribly in my job if I have to come back and ask for additional funds. But I believe that, again, I believe very strongly in Sedgwick County and the Wichita community to support something like this. And I just think we need to give them the opportunity. But I think they also want to look, and they'd love to be a part of a group effort rather than, again, a Coke or a Spirit or someplace fully doing it. I think doing it with the county and the city and private support, I think would be fantastic for us all to do well to address this issue.
Very good. Other question, Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to do some follow-up as I continue thinking about this. So, you may have already said this, but I'm not sure I caught it. So let me ask a clarifying question. Mm-hmm. If you stand up this pipeline program, when will we see certified psychologists or psychiatrists, I should say, coming out the end of the pipeline, available potentially for Wichita service? When will that happen? And how many will there be? And when is that future date?
That'd be 2026, correctly. If we start in 2024, it would be graduating 2 a year, and then 2 a year from there on.
2 a year.
2 a year.
Okay. And if we don't do this, are these folks, is there a path for them to become psychiatrists without this government support?
Would you like that? Sure.
So the way that child psychiatry works is that you go to an adult psychiatry residency first, and which we have here at KU Wichita. The unfortunate thing is, if any of our residents choose to do a child psychiatry fellowship, they cannot stay in Wichita to do it. So they actually have to leave and go somewhere else. They have to go to Kansas City or somewhere else in the country to do their fellowship, which really decreases the chance that they're going to come back to Wichita. So no, there's not a path for them to become a child psychiatrist here. And like I said, there's only two to three spots a year in Kansas City. Oh, and we do have people here at KU Wichita that want to be a child psychiatrist. But like I said, they leave and to go do that.
Okay. Thank you for the answer to that question. Just to the commissioners, let me just make some comments. I'm concerned that we have not identified a long-term revenue stream for this. And I've talked about before that this is in the mental health part of what we do here in Sedgwick County, and I think we need to identify a revenue stream that's dedicated towards mental health issues, and this would be something like that. But until we do that, we're just going to continue to make small efforts here and there, and I think that we at some point, we need to have a larger conversation about a revenue stream that's dedicated towards this issue. And I said this at the en banc meeting, I'll say it again. I think that until we do that, we have I think it's great to have a desire, but the reality is our taxpayers need to be involved in this discussion. And I think this is bigger than just 5 commissioners. And I don't think we ought to be making a decision to add on new spending. In fact, I think you mentioned year one, Mr. Chairman. I think that the reality is once you start year one, there's that expectation there's going to be year two, and on it goes. And so, may I also suggest, I think that there's lots of good issues under the sun. This is one of many great ideas, and I think once you start this one, you're talking about all kinds of other things that are very similar, because there's all kinds of things out there that need money that are really noble and worthy ideas. So I'm concerned that we, have a passionate heart towards this issue. Children's mental health obviously is pretty high on that list. But I think once you start this, I think it's number one, it's hard to stop it. Number two, I think there's people right behind them asking for similar help. And we talk about ARPA money, it's a good temporary solution, but that's not a long-term solution. I think ARPA money should be for one-time spending, and I don't think that's what this is. So I have some concerns about. I appreciate the request. I don't think we're ready for this today. And I think if we're going to do this for real, we need to have a revenue stream that's really given to this type of connection. And right now, I don't think we have that. So that's my opinion. I appreciate the passion and the heart that wants to help children. But I don't think this is the right place to get the money, is my opinion. Thank you, Chairman.
Let me correct something for Commissioner Howell. We are not looking to fund this entire program.
I understand.
But that's what Brad's job is. That's why I wanted to make sure that I introduced him properly on what his job is. And he doesn't do this just for this program. He does it for everything that's happening at KU Medical Center here in Wichita. There are all kinds of departments in the training facility that we have, a jewel here in Sedgwick County. And that is KU Medical Center. So this is just one program, but it's a critical program that they're trying to start here to add to that one more diamond to that jewel that we have here. I'm not, and we have not considered funding this entire program. We're trying to kickstart this so that they can get this rolling, and Brad can put the funding in place for the out years, and Dr. Carlson can then start establishing this fellowship so that they know that we've got this fellowship here in Sedgwick County. So that's why I think that this request is one-time money. I agree, but it is a one-time request also. So I want to make sure that everyone is clear on that. Any further questions? Well, what I'd like you to be able to do is work with Tim and Tom and see if we can come up with a solution to help you kickstart this, because I think that we can use ARPA money, one-time money. I know it's one-time money, but that's what we're looking at, is see if we can help Brad start this ball rolling to make sure that we have a fellowship that can start turning out the professionals that we need for the future. Commissioner Meitzner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick ones. Brad, is this program, is this in a piece of, or eventually will be part of the potential WSU, KU, Life Science School of whatever the official word is?
That's a good question. I am not privy to the on the ground conversations about it. It is a part of our school, and I believe all that goes together along with that plan, as opposed to, my understanding is that Dean Minzen, even on the KU Kansas City side, is not wanting to split up any part of the educational piece of the campus as best they can. So I'm assuming, but it's a good question, and the more I learn about that project, I'm happy to share more specifics.
No, I know, yeah. The more we all learn about that one. So, and then Dr. Carlson, are you in communication, or do you know Dr. Stephanie Kuhlman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I know Dr. Kuhlman, yeah.
So you're aware of her efforts with a mom or a doctor group and a parents of adolescents group? discussion?
I don't know about that group. I know her and work with her on some projects through Wesley that are pertaining to child mental health, but I think being newer to the community, I don't know about all of the organizations and groups that she's part of yet.
Okay. Well, if I can help connect, unless you already know her, you can tell her that you heard. So anyway, that would be good, I think, another source of information. There's some grassroots efforts going on, but not an official capacity of certifying child, educated psychologists. But there is an effort going on with adolescents in the young age schools. So
yeah. One thing I wanted to say about WSU, and obviously that's something that I've since coming just learned about, didn't really know it was part of it, and to me that's really exciting. I think that medical students decide what they want to do and what kind of doctor they want to be based on what they're exposed to. Right? And I went to medical school at the University of Colorado. I happened to work at Children's Hospital Colorado, which has, a large child psychiatry program, and I was exposed to that. I would have never known to pick child psychiatry or to go into that. I mean, the true story, my grandparents who are 90 years old and live here in Wichita, when I told them I was going to be a psychiatrist, they said, well, we thought you went to medical school to be a doctor, because we didn't grow up with that, I didn't know there was really any other kind of doctor other than a family medicine physician, because that's all I'd ever seen in Harper. And so I think that exposure, I'm excited about that. I'm excited about getting medical students interested in psychiatry and child psychiatry, because a lot of the students, we'll be training are probably from Kansas and from this area, and that also helps increases our chances that they want to come back and be here and work here, because it is their home and their community. So just my, again, optimism, I think, about that.
Thank you for your optimistic approach. So in theory, I this is the first time hearing of this, so I'd like to understand a little better, and the theory of ARPA money for Kickstart 1 year seems to be comfortable to me, but I'll reserve official comment until knowing a little more, if that's all right, respectfully.
Sure. And I just also wanted to add, or at least reiterate, again, I'm sure there's lots of things that are pitched as we just need the startup money and then someone else will take care of it. But ultimately is our goal. We would love for there to be graduate medical education, and we are aiming towards that, so that this isn't we didn't get it, so we're still on the hook somewhere else. And I would be surprised, given the track record of our residency and the people around it, that we would have a hard time being accredited. But we don't intend for this to be that's a high percentage chance of success on that. But we intend to do that, but understand if this becomes something that is needing consistent funding. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Lopez.
Well, I just want to thank you both for coming so much. I'm really excited to see a program like this. If you said 12 psychiatrists, 500 interactions with patients a year, and they go through for 2 years, that's 12,000 interactions with our kids in our community. And I think especially given what we all just saw in Texas, how needed this program is here. And so I'm very much looking forward to it. And once we kind of see with ARPA what that's going to look like, I'd be supportive as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't see any more questions. Dr. Carlson and Brad, thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it. We'll ask you to work with Tim and with Lindsay to see what we can get on our agenda for the future, see if we can help you out, kickstart your program.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming over. Okay, Tim, what do you have next?
Commissioners, we have Lindsay to talk about the price of government, so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Tim. And I will just take a moment to say rock chalk, of course. Can't let an opportunity pass by. So let me. Oh, thank you. A little slow sometimes. Okay, so, I don't know why we're laughing. That's never a good sign.
I thought the doctor said she graduated from K-State.
As undergrad, but she works for KU now. She's gotten her affiliations worked
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So, commissioners, we have talked about price of government over time This is, I think, the third time we've done this presentation in the last several years, but we update it frequently. Again, what the price of government is an indicator that tells us how we're doing. We can compare ourselves to it over time, and we can compare other communities to it. So basically what it is a way to evaluate the cost to the community. So what it looks at is the amount of revenue that a government collects from citizens, so not from other governments, and it puts that relative to the personal income of the community. And so that is what is essentially determined to be the cost of government. And so what you can see on this slide here is our history, because we seem to be putting everything back to 2008 lately. That's why you'll see this here. Historically, we have been around a 1.02 cents per dollar of personal income. But you can see that for 2021, which unfortunately does not have a label, but that is the final bullet here, we were actually down to 0.84, not even a whole penny per dollar of personal income. So this concept actually comes from a book that was written 15, 20 years ago that tries to talk about what are you buying? If you look at government as something that you buy, how do you evaluate its worth and what you're getting? So what that book tells us is gross domestic product, or GDP, would be the best real-time indicator to tell us what we're doing. However, you can't get that type of information in a timely fashion for state or local. So what the authors came up with is this approach where, again, you look at non-governmental revenues, put that in terms of the aggregate personal income of your community, and that gives you the price of government. And so you can see on this slide toward the bottom, the revenues that came in for 2021 that are non-governmental were about $252 million. The personal income in our community is estimated at $29.9 billion. And so we have looked at that. If you remember the big statistics sheet that we've looked at over time, this is the indicator that's right across the bottom, and we know our personal income has grown significantly over time.
Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
So that's the personal income for the entire community, but that's not the average income. How do you take that into account? Because how many people, can you break that into a pie to tell you how many people are at certain percentage of their personal income?
I believe we can. This comes from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, so I am certain I could dig in and find that. But what this is telling you is just as a county government, here's how much revenue came into the government relative to the personal income. Now, what would be perfect is if we could look at that for everybody. If we could look at what does state of Kansas have? What does city of Wichita have? Anybody that we pay taxes to, any government entity, we would want to see what those prices of government are and add them all together. And that would give us a really good measure of what's going on. But in terms of a median personal income, we do have that information. I don't know that we have it at different levels, but I know that Jack Joseph in GIS has put one together based on district, and so I can provide that information. But it doesn't necessarily, we don't know how many revenues come from those areas, right? And so we wouldn't have a way to do like a personalized or district-wide price of government, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of wealth here, but it's not
Yes.
equally distributed.
Right.
And so when we're saying that that's equally distributed, that's incorrect.
Well, and I don't
But
think it's
whatever.
attempting to say that it is. It's just a measure for Sedgwick County, what our price of government looks like over time relative to ourselves, and then if we wanted to compare to others.
Okay, so I would like it broken down by district if we could get that at a
The
different
personal
time.
income?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
And last year, when you gave us this briefing, didn't you have the information for the city of Wichita also?
I did. Unfortunately, their audit is not out yet, so I do not have access to their revenues. But as soon as it comes out, I will produce that for you and send it to you by email.
Good. Well, it's a good comparison.
It is.
Thank you.
Okay, so why does this matter? Why do we care about price of government? First of all, it's the measure of the cost of county services. It addresses how much citizens pay to fund our services. Again, it includes everything we get except for any money we get from the government, be it state or federal, or even the city of Wichita. If they were to give us money, we would exclude that. So what it does is it serves as a financial index. And so the reason this matters is this final bullet. There is a correlation, and that is what that whole price of government book that I talked about before is based on. There is a point in time where your price of government can get so high that citizens are upset because they're paying too much. Alternatively, there is a time when your revenue can get so low, or your price of government can get so low, that you're no longer meeting the needs. You're no longer able to provide the services that citizens expect. And so we've always looked at this. You have a handout that looks like this that kind of shows where we have been over time. This is the basis for that 1 cent and I don't even know what you would call it, 2/1000ths of a penny. So what you can see is that we are at one of the lowest spots we have been really since before, if you look at 2011, that's really when we started to feel the effects of the recession in our actual revenues. And so this is based on actual information as opposed to budget, which is what we're used to looking at. But you can see that it has steadily declined, and we have talked about that. The flat budgets, the fact that we, at least from 2016 budget on, we essentially reset our mill levy rate each year to that 29.359 mills. And so what that has done, because we are so largely driven by property tax, is it has kept that revenue stream relatively flat, while personal income in the community has grown, which is great, right? We've talked about that. That means there's more discretionary income, hopefully, for some folks, and that overall the health of our county is better. So it doesn't, though, take into account the fact that COVID happened. Obviously, for cities that are so much more reliant on fees or on permits, on sales taxes. For example, Sedgwick County, right, only gets about 25% of the overall 1 cent sales tax that's generated. For those other entities, their revenue went down significantly because of other factors coming into play, like the federal government giving stimulus checks, other types of programs that are out there that will somewhat distort the picture for a couple of years. So it's not perfect by any means. So we still have to have some kind of subjective look at this. And that's where your strategic plan, your performance measures, and all of those things come into play, so that we can also evaluate whether the commission is getting the objectives it desires. Not just how many people are we serving, but what is the quality of the level of service and all of that. So there is no right price per se. Ours, again, tends to hover around that 1 penny mark. The more services you offer, so if you do utilities, the higher that number will be. But overall, that's where we tend to be. We have been significantly below that, again, for some time now. And so part of the reason I wanted to talk about this today, in addition to a commissioner request, is that we do need to start talking about the property tax, the mill levy rate that will be included in the 2023 manager's recommended budget. We know that with the revenue neutral rate, we have a lot more that we need to know the day of the recommended budget than we have had to have historically. It used to be it was just the last update. We would say, here's the maximum budget, here's your maximum property tax rate, and we would publish that as a part of a hearing. Now, in order to have a revenue neutral rate, you will all adopt a resolution that day saying this is what that looks like. And then we understand that now there will be, when the budget is actually adopted, so not recommended date, but adopted, we will have to produce a resolution that shows a name and a vote associated with a revenue neutral rate if we exceed that. Again, as we talked about during finances budget hearing, WSU alone, unless the rest of the county mill levy comes down to offset that, the WSU mill levy set at 1.5 mils alone will require us to do a revenue neutral rate hearing and mailer. So we have Lots to talk about, but you've heard lots and lots of needs. We're not done hearing about them. We'll have another compensation discussion on tomorrow. And then again this Friday, we have the Mental Health Coalition's recommendations as well as the Sedgwick Lofton Task Force recommendations. So there's still more to hear on that. So what we will need to start talking about and need feedback on, not necessarily today, but I wanted to get this brewing, is what your expectation is. We used to have a target mill levy rate resolution. That's at that 29.359 mils. We no longer have that. Historically, before that was in place, when it was adopted in 2015, we would do essentially what the city of Wichita does, which is where if they adopt a budget and let's say it's 30 mils, and the technical adjustment comes back as 30.2, in order to generate the revenue necessary to support that budget, then they would use the 30.2 as the default in the next year's budget. That is what we historically have done. And so that would mean instead of 29.359, we would do 29.370. And that is roughly if we look at the median value of a home in Sedgwick County, that's about 20 cents a year. For a citizen, but it means potentially another $100,000 to the overall county's property tax levy, which of course helps with compensation and all the other needs. So it's just something to think about, and we will take direction from you as to which way you would like to go, but maybe just start thinking on that. I know it's not a fun topic.
Thank you. Questions for Lindsay? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to clarify. So this revenue excludes state and federal grants,
Correct.
but it does include sales tax and obviously our property tax levy.
Yes.
It's interesting looking at this chart that in years past, not so much the last decade, but before that, it's very dynamic. I mean, there's places it changed significantly from one year to the next. Over the last decade, it's actually been fairly flat. It's teetered up and down a couple hundredths of a percent. But it hasn't changed very much. And looking back in time here, the times it seems like it's really gone down is years where there was a recession. I feel like we're in a recession, or starting a recession today. I mean, that's my take. I mean, I probably shouldn't use the R word, I suppose, but that's what I feel. The economy is pretty complex issue, and I'm not the expert on the economy, but it sure feels like a recession is beginning to me. And so in years where the recession happened, it looks like the price of government in those years dramatically changed. If revenue grows faster than income, we have a higher price of government. If income grows faster than revenue, we have a lower price of government. I'd have to go back and look at some of these years and find out why it changed so drastically. Is there stories behind some of these things that explain what happened when these things changed so quickly?
I think your mill levy rates are a big denominator here, and then I think as we start replacing, if you remember, we've talked about the LAVTR and the city-county revenue sharing and some of those things, the commercial machinery equipment. As those things start to play into your revenues, we start to see pretty dramatic swings. And so you would see that starting probably around the 2000 mark on. Before that, I would have to do some additional research. I don't know off the top of my head what caused those fluctuations.
Well, the population has nothing to do with this calculation, but in the assessed value, is also interesting to see how the assessed value guys continue to grow pretty steadily. I don't think there's very many places on here where it went flat or even went down, but most places it goes up fairly well. The two calculations really are the income and the revenue. We only have control over the revenue side, and the income side is just what it is, right? So, are there any projections on income going forward?
So we could put that together. We have that as through the financial forecast.
it seems to me the simple answer to the question that was asked earlier, if you take the income and divide it by our population, would that not be a average income?
It would for the entire county, and we do have that information. But what we don't have right now, or at least I don't have with me, is what that would be on a district level. But yes, we can calculate that per person just looking at this. That's a per capita measure.
We do have assessed value by the district level, though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I know that we have personal income.
I've seen income by district
Yes,
level as well.
I just don't have it with me today.
All right, well, I think this is a great chart. I generally like this data, but I don't know that, I mean, to me, it's interesting, but I'm not sure it changes my decisions on anything at this point.
Sure.
But thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Lopez?
Thank you. When did our staffing shortages really begin? And is there any correlation between us going under that penny mark for the last 13 years? I mean, is there time?
I think what we have, I will let Tim maybe speak to ComCare's side of the world as to when staffing shortages began, because that was before really, I think, the rest of the organization started seeing the larger swings. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's an interesting question. The ComCare staffing issues probably have been in existence for the last 3 or 4 years. But I think when we go back to 2008, and then we look at the pay model that we've used since then, we've had a number of years where we have had no increase for employees and that sort of thing. So that, over time, accumulates and drives us into, I think, in the circumstances that we're in now.
Yeah, I didn't figure it would be the same year, but I did, just wondering how long having that under a penny has impacted that, but I would imagine that there'd be a correlation there. When did we stop adopting doing the mill levy rate in the same way that the city does? When did that stop at the county?
So that was as part of the 2016 budget was the first time that we did that. And what we used was the 2011 mill levy rate at that time.
Okay, those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
I'd like to comment on that in just a second, but before I do we have the price of government for other jurisdictions like Wichita or other counties? Or do we have the total price of government for, if you look at price of government overall, how that's changed over time? And taxpayers, I think, are feeling the burden of government, and the question is, and they're feeling it not just, when they pay their tax bill, most of them don't really think about how much of this is going to Sedgwick County versus how much is going to schools or how much is going to the city that I live in or whatever. And so it'd be nice to see the total price of government, how that's changed. Again, anecdotally, it feels like it's gone up, but I can't prove that. I guess it'd be nice to validate that or to prove that that's not a real feeling that's accurate. So is that data out there?
So we have to compute that, and it's not hard to do that. For Wichita, we do have that data. We don't have the most recent information for 2021, so as soon as we have that, we'll compute it and get it out. I have not done that for the state of Kansas or any of the school districts, but honestly, the school districts are probably the easiest to do because they have so few non-governmental revenue streams.
And I think the funding there has changed drastically.
Yes, it has.
Yes, it has. And so I'd like to see that data, because I think, again, as these folks get their statement from the clerk this year on the revenue neutral rate notification, I need to go back and look at the format of that. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the tax burden broken down by jurisdiction. I think that needs to be clarified, and also a couple of years of history to show what it was last year, what it is this year, both in mill levy and dollars. Because I think that information really opens up the eyes as to where where do the tax dollars go? When people realize that the county is about 1/4 of their total tax burden for property taxes, a lot of folks, I think, feel less angry about the county, perhaps. But so, I mean, that's really good. With respect to the mill levy trying to stay stagnant, I mean, I'm not sure how many of the commissioners have heard the entire argument, but that technical adjustment is not something we vote for. It's something that happens after we approve a budget. And so to accept the technical adjustment as a baseline for the following year's budget is maybe normal and legal, but it does allow the levy to creep up over time. Typically creeps up a little bit here and a little bit there, and before you know it, you've got a tax mill levy increase that no one actually really, intentionally voted for, but it happens. And so that was an effort to not let that happen. We simply targeted 29.359 as a target, or in other words, reset that every year, ignoring, if you will, the technical adjustment. To me, it's a policy choice that was made back in 2016. I was part of that conversation. I still support that. Again, if we want to increase the mill levy, let's vote for that. But I don't like to do it simply because of technical adjustments and simply because it happens to be normal amongst other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
Commissioner Lopez.
Sorry, I just have one more quick thing. When you're sending the state information, can you also send us how much, and I know I've seen it before, but I can't recall the numbers, how much in the last, I don't know, however many years you think is appropriate, that they used to fund to the county that now we're funding out of our general fund? Because I think that that's probably a pretty big impact as well.
It's massive. Yes,
Thank you.
I'll be happy to.
Hey, other questions? I don't see any. Lindsay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Tim or Tom?
All we had, sir.
Very good. Well, thank you all. We are adjourned.